Hello and welcome to Berry Aftercare, where today we are going to be talking about identity exposed through your self-talk. So I've got a funny little story for you. I bought this book on podcasting, and it talked about how it's important to have some sort of tease for your podcast. And so I thought, okay, I've not been doing this really well. So yesterday, I made a little commercial and I posted it on my social media, and it was a tease for my podcast. And what it said was, you know, Jada, take it from Jada Pinkett Smith. She's talking about self-talk, and I read her little quote in my on in my little commercial, and my friend calls me later and she said, "Connie, what the heck was that?" And I just started laughing. I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Why are you quoting Jada Pinkett Smith?" I said, "Well, because I read this book on podcasting. It says you're supposed to find something." And so what I did was I Googled, celebrities and self-talk. She was like, "You are aware that Jada Pinkett Smith is quite a controversial person in the news right now, or in pop culture or whatever." I'm like, "Well, no, of course I didn't know that, because I don't partake." So that's my little experiment. So look forward to maybe some faux pas in my commercials for the podcast. But anyway, here we are. We're going to carry on like usual, which was commercial free for my podcast. But I'm going to work on improving this thing, because you know what? I think this has great information for people and I want to share it. So thank you for joining me. I super, super appreciate your time. I know there are a bazillion podcasts. I know there are a bazillion places for you to get information. And so the fact that you're listening to this one really warms my heart and gives my life purpose. I say that tongue in cheek. My life has a lot of purpose and I'm happy in a lot of ways. But this really is. I went to school so that I could help educate people about the joys of living free from chronic diseases can bring. So, of course, obesity is a chronic disease. I suffer from some chronic diseases myself, like addiction and depression and anxiety, as do many of us. So, finding ways to cope with those things in healthy ways is a great way to experience life. So, today we're going to be talking about your self talk. And the reason I chose this topic, and I've spoken about it before, in fact, many of the podcast episodes that you'll listen to, you will hear some part of it devoted to the importance of having positive self-talk, because it's so critical to your long-term success when it comes to maintaining your weight loss, because you want to enjoy your life as best you can, right? Anyway, I cracked myself up and on we go. So in the last episode, we talked also about identity and how our level of self-worth is reflected through our behavior. If we identify as a person who takes pride in caring for our physical health, right? I choose health. That's a mantra. If we take pride in being a person whose behavior reflects that, then it's an indication to others and a reminder to ourselves that we are improving our self-esteem and our self-worth. And every time we make a step in that direction, it begets additional positive behavior in that regard. Similarly, when we have positive self-worth, our behaviors are going to indicate our value, right? The opposite is true as well. If we have a low self-worth, our behaviors are going to indicate that. So this development of this whole positive or negative self-esteem, it begins in our childhood. It's very influenced by the messages we get externally, not just from our family members, but certainly they're a big part of it, but also from the kids we go to school with, from our teachers, from extended relatives. Maybe your siblings were the ones who picked on you and criticized you for your weight or the color of your hair or your height or whatever it was. But our primary caretakers, whether it's our parents, our grandparents, the daycare center, whomever it was, have a lot of influence on how children's self-esteem develops. Here's the deal. Regardless, as adults, we can improve our self-esteem if it's been damaged along the way. And honestly, I haven't met many adults that haven't had some level of damage to their self-esteem. We've all taken hits. We've been teased for one thing or another. We've been told negative things about ourselves at one time or another. And the younger we are and the more frequently that happens as children, the more ingrained those messages become. And then tragically, we become the ones repeating those unhealthy messages and those negative messages to ourselves in the form of self-talk, right? So we can, as adults, either learn some tools for ditching the negative self-talk and increasing the positive self-talk, or we can, sadly, which a lot of people do, is we can continue to cause ourselves that kind of emotional pain through our negative self-talk, and that's just going to continue to damage our self-worth. And we talked last week in depth, and I talk regularly about the worse we feel about ourselves, the more negatively we think about ourselves, the worse our behavior is going to be, and the less positively we're going to treat other people in our lives. So it behooves you and everybody in your life to learn some skills for improving your self-talk. And it will absolutely increase the chances of your following through with the behaviors necessary for you to keep whatever weight you lose off, and especially for enjoying your life, enjoying the quality of life that you create for yourself. So it's your choice. So this is a big topic, and it can't be covered in one episode. But we can and we will focus on a super impactful aspect of healing, or if you unfortunately choose to further destroy your self-worth. And this can and will affect your post-op eating and your exercise behavior for better or for worse. And that one impact, or that one aspect, is self-talk. So here are the 4 highlights for today's talk. We sometimes create or burrow a rabbit hole as a result of our negative self-talk, and that takes us to all sorts of unhealthy places. So we're going to talk about the burrowing of that rabbit hole. I'm going to introduce you to a committee in your head. And in this committee is a critical parent, a child, and a healthy adult. And then finally, we'll talk about how to work on correcting this negative self-talk. And the committee is going to be involved in that process. And we'll use the 4 ACEs, which I've talked about many times in different episodes, to improve your self-talk and ultimately continue to improve your lifestyle. All right, let's start with that rabbit hole. That rabbit hole is burrowed, dug down, zoom, as a result of negative self-talk, and takes you to all sorts of unpleasant places. Now, as I said, this negative self-talk doesn't start with ourselves. Oftentimes, it's something that's happened as we've grown up. If we're criticized as children, then we say to ourselves, "Oh, I'm such a," fill in the blank with unpleasant word. You call yourself some sort of ugly name. And then as we get older, it becomes more like, why do I even try? I can't, why do I try with sports? I can't do anything right. Or why do I even try it math? Because I'm just no good at it. I'm just stupid and whatever it is. And then forget about the whole weight thing because you've been criticized externally, and chances are good, if you're listening to this podcast, you've continued the battering, right? You've continued the onslaught of negative criticism that comes from yourself. Now, here's an important point, my friends. You have control over what you say to yourself. Yes, it's hard. I know that. You don't have a choice over how other people behave, what they think, how they feel, or what they say, but you absolutely can change how you think and what you say to yourself. It becomes a decision you have to make. But we've all been in this place. Think about it. You've got your plan. You got your plan for your healthy day of eating. And then, somebody brings not just a donut, but several dozen donuts to share with everybody at the office. And there they sit in the break room. And so you think, I've been doing really well lately, and one's not going to hurt. So you have your donut, and you're like, okay, go back to your desk, and an hour later you get up and you go back into that break room because you want to get a bottle of water from the fridge, and there those donuts are. And from the minute you walk in the door, they're calling your name until you decide it would be just dang downright rude of you to ignore them altogether. So you indulge those little donuts and say, fine, you give in, right? They're like a child who just won't leave you alone. And you're finally like, yes, fine, go do it. Get away from me. You have a second donut. Now you're not feeling too good about yourself, right? You're starting to have that pit in your stomach, not only from all the sugar and the fat in the donuts, but because you just are upset with yourself and that negative self-talk starting to nag at you, right? Then after lunch, middle of the afternoon, you just can't help but notice there are 2 donuts left. 2 donuts! Of course you didn't. Well, you didn't take both of them. But maybe you ate another one. And that's when it starts. Come on! What are you doing? You start battering yourself with your self-talk. You start calling yourself names. Look what you did. You veered off track. Not just veered off track. Man, you are way off track with all those donuts. When are you going to learn? How many times is it going to take for you to make the same mistake before you figure this thing out? What is the matter with you? Like you're talking to yourself in the third party here, right? Are you trying to regain weight? What is the matter with you? When will it end? And the spiral spirals, right? This is the rabbit hole. This is the downward spiral. And where is that going to take you? It takes you to all kinds of unpleasant places. So what I mean by that is you're not just hurting yourself with this negative self-talk, although you are hurting yourself. So let's go there. There's one little path off the rabbit hole down deep there where now you're feeling bad about yourself. You go back to your desk. You're all ticked off. You sit there and you mull over this. You replay it in your mind. You're calling yourself all the bad names, and you lose 30 minutes of productivity, which is going to lead to something else, possibly from the boss or the coworkers are depending on you. Okay, there's one place. Now you're feeling really sick to your stomach because you've consumed a lot of sugar, which isn't something you typically do. And so you're feeling physically uncomfortable. And maybe that causes you to perspire and you get the dumping syndrome. And now you're losing another half hour to work. And then you start talking to yourself about not only the fact that you went way off track with these donuts, but you're kind of a jerk all around. And why would anybody want to be friends with you? And why the heck is your partner stayed with you? And why do your kids even look up to you, right? Now we are way off the rails. And not only with the eating, but with how we are badgering ourselves. What makes you feel better? Nothing healthy, right? If you're way down in that rabbit hole, you're going to likely engage in something unhealthy. Now, not only is there that rabbit hole that causes more self-damage in terms of thought and behavior, but you're going to be negative to the people at the office because you're feeling grumpy, and if they ask you for something, you might snap at them. And you are surely, okay, you're not surely, but surely you are not being productive. You are not giving your all. And I don't know what your values are or how how important it is for you to give your best at work. But if that is a thing for you, then you're clearly not doing that, nor are you being fair to your coworkers. And you can rationalize and justify that they're on their phone and their Facebook and their whatever. That's not the point. We're talking about you and the values you have for your life and being the best, healthiest adult self that you can be. Because God knows you don't need another reason to beat yourself up. Now you go home and you're still feeling like crap physically and you want to take a nap, but your kids need you to help with homework, or your partner wants you to go for a walk with them, or you have a gym date with your friend and you're not feeling good, so you cancel on them. And so now you've hurt yourself, you've negatively affected your coworkers, and now you're negatively affecting other people in your life. So you see what an awful spiral this negative self-talk causes. And a lot of times we want to believe that how we treat ourselves is limited just to the damage it does to ourselves, but it's not true. I wish it were. Not that I want any of us to cause ourselves damage or to be unkind to ourselves, but it's really, really unfair and unpleasant to the people we affect when we get in a bad mood, right? And yes, it happens to everybody at times. It's not that it's not going to happen, and you can mitigate the outcome of that by taking responsibility. It doesn't take away the hurt or the pain we cause to people, but by being accountable and going back and saying, I let myself down today by engaging in behavior that's not healthy for me. And I also took out my feelings on you. And I am super sorry. Again, it doesn't take away the pain that they experienced, but people who love us are willing to forgive us in most cases if we're willing to acknowledge what we've done to harm them. So this business of negative self-talk, right, takes us down these really awful rabbit holes. And if we don't get a hold of it and make some changes, who knows how long that can impact our trajectory toward positive health in our life, toward positive communication with the people we love, toward feeling better physically, emotionally, spiritually, the whole thing, right? We can't separate our bodies and our brains. We are one being at this point in our life. Regardless of if you're a spiritual person, you know that you are body and spirit. But we are confined as human beings into this body that we carry around with us, and we want to do it good, right? We want to do other people good. All right, so let's talk about a couple of ways, and I've done podcast episodes and videos in the past about self-talk, but I've not introduced this concept that we're going to talk about today, which was the second point that I brought up. Introducing to you one of the committees in your head, and this committee is made up of a critical parent, a child, and a healthy adult. So, are you saying to yourself, what is she talking about? What are you talking about, committees in your head? Some of you may be familiar with this term and some of you may not. I first learned about the committees in my head when I was early into my recovery from my own addictions. And this is 30 some years ago. And so people would talk about these committees in our head. So if you've not heard about these committees in your head, I'm going to give you a definition that's by a woman named Dr. April Seifert, and she's a social psychologist. And what she says is, we have these comments that run through our head almost constantly. We're constantly having this chatter in our brains, right? So sometimes there are committee members, these, I don't want to say voices that you hear because I don't mean literally, but we have a lot of self-talk and we have a lot of chatter in our brains throughout the day. So these committees always seem to have something to say. They have a judgment to make about pretty much every area of your life, right? The committees in your head, these are some mental patterns that you've developed over time that can lead you to maybe overfunction. They can lead you to be super self-critical. They can lead you to ignore your own needs. But it's a lot of chatter that can lead you to suffer unnecessarily. So let's talk about the committee in your head. Sometimes in therapy, one of the things therapists will say to a client or a patient, for example, the patient says, I, I'm just the most unproductive person. And the therapist may say something like, whose voice do you hear saying that? And if the person thinks back, they're like, my mom used to tell me that all the time, that I was so unproductive. One of the things that runs through my head very regularly is the message, you need to earn your keep. Con, you need to earn your keep. You need to earn your keep. My father said that to all of us, right? But we need to earn our keep, meaning you're part of this family. You need to pitch in and help out. And in my case, it was financial as well. I started working at the age of 14 because there was not, my parents did an amazing job with one income and 6 children. And we not only had everything we needed, we had a lot of what we wanted. And that's extreme privilege, right? We did not know that the extra things we had were like comparatively, not so fancy. But we had a lot, and for that I am very grateful. And as I look back, though, there wasn't with 6 kids and provisions for when I say we had a lot, I mean bicycles, and we had a boat. And let me tell you about this boat. It's hysterical. It was like a Little John fishing boat, and there was a little square like metal cabin type thing put on it. And because we were very little kids, my dad put like a chain link fence on the front of the boat so we couldn't fall out. It was this funny looking little boat. But what did we know? We had a boat. We got to play on the river and go to the sandbar and play. But the message was you've got to earn your keep. So there wasn't a lot of extra money for play clothes. We went to a Catholic school, and so we had uniforms. And I worked in the office at the Catholic school from the time I was in middle school to help earn my keep. We got tuition reduction for working there. So that's a message I hear all the time, and I think it's part of what leads me to be such a workaholic. What messages did you get that play in a loop in your brain? So as Dr. Seifert was saying, these committees in your head have developed into patterns that repeat themselves, and they can lead you to overfunction. So I do tend to overfunction, right? I'm not going to have just one job. I'm going to do 3 or 4 because I got to earn my keep. And it may be, you've got to excel at school. This was not the message I was given, BTW. In fact, I was joking with a friend yesterday, and I said, it's an absolute miracle, and I mean in a spiritual sense, that I got into a PhD program because I was not overfunctioning when I went to college. But a lot of people get that message that you need to be the best at school, you need to be the best at school, you need to be the best at school. So they overfunction, but in a way that causes them to suffer maybe. Or maybe you were criticized, never could do anything right, or compared to a sibling, and you always came up on the short end of that stick. And what that has taught you is to be very, very self-critical, and maybe to ignore your own needs. Maybe your job in the family was to care for everybody else, or perhaps you actually had a sick sibling or parent, and your job was a caretaker. So whatever these things that roll in our head on a constant basis, just a repeating loop, we tend to repeat to ourselves today in various forms. So what kind of messages are you giving yourself that are very unnecessary and are harmful to you? All right, let's imagine one of the committees in our head. All right, a 3-member committee: the critical parent, the child, and the healthy adult. Now, I didn't make this up. This is a model of understanding people, relationships, personality by looking at your interactions. And it was developed by a psychiatrist in the 1960s. And it's called transactional analysis, which isn't really important, but real sounds real fancy, doesn't it? But in this model, there are those 3 main characters. And what these are ego states, right? The critical parent, the child, the healthy adult. And it can get complicated, but let's use these characters to discuss self-talk, all right? Let's use the donut case from the beginning of the episode. So you go into the break room and the child says, "Ooh, donuts. I love donuts. I want to have a donut." And the critical parent voice says, "What are you thinking? You're not allowed to eat those. Should you really be eating that?" And the child says, "But I want a donut. I want a donut. I want a donut." Now, giving into that donut means your child won, right? And then after you ate the donut, the critical parent steps up their game and is like, "Look what you've done. Look what you've done. You can't be trusted anywhere. There's just really no hope for you. What are you going to learn?" So now the child feels bad. Now let's say that you make the choice to invite the healthy parent into the conversation, because the healthy parent's been set in the corner by the critical adult. So let's say you go into the break room and you see the donuts and the child's like, because the child wants what it wants when it wants, right? It's a child. That ego state of a child is, I want what I want when I want it. And oh, by the way, that is also what addicts say. That's the mantra of an addict. I want what I want when I want it. Just throwing that in a little bit. So your child is going to pipe up whenever it wants what it wants when it wants it, right? I want that cookie. I want that donut. I want that cake. I want that ice cream. I want that. No problem, right? Of course you want that. That's human nature, right? Now, if you've had a critical parent on your case for a lot of years and you've become your own critical parent, in steps all the criticism, the negative self-talk, and you may get involved in that critical self-talk after you've eaten the donut. But let's say the child is going, "I want that donut, I want that donut," and the critical parent in your head is going, "Don't you dare eat that donut. If you eat that donut." Now let's invite the healthy adult into the conversation. And the healthy adult, if you're unfamiliar with being a healthy adult, here's a little clue for you. And think about it. I'm teasing. But you make healthy adult decisions in a lot of areas of your life. So you are perfectly capable of this. And chances are you're a healthy parent to your own children. So part of this process is the reparenting. But a healthy adult would come into the situation and say to the child, "Of course you want a donut. What kid doesn't want a donut? Heck, what adult doesn't want a donut?" And to the critical parent, they would say, "You know what? You haven't helped for the last 40 years. So zip it." Now, the healthy adult then says to the child, "Of course you want this, but my job is to keep you safe and healthy," because that's what a healthy adult does for a child. That's how a healthy adult handles a child. They want them to be safe. They want them to be healthy. They want to do the things that are best for them. So in this case, the healthy adult says, "Of course you want that donut." And I totally get it. And, there are times when you're going to be able to have that donut. But, you're at work. You've got a lot to do today. And if you eat that donut, you're going to get tired. You're going to be sluggish. You're probably going to get mad. And I just can't allow you to have a donut right now. So come on. I know you're going to have a little temper tantrum about this, and that's fine. Temper tantrum away. But we're going back to the desk without the donut. And that, my friends, is one of the skills and one of the tools you can use. So whenever you find yourself wanting what you want when you want it, you're standing in front of the vending machine, or you have an emotional uh, want to eat because food makes you feel better. You're an emotional eater and you're like, "Oh, I'm mad, and so right now I would like this," or, "Oh, I'm scared and right now I would like that," because that's what you've done in the past, right? That's your child saying, "I want what I want when I want it." Your critical person is going to say, "Oh, you're never going to get this right. You're such a loser. When are you going to get it?" The healthy parent, if invited in, slash, you draw on your own strength, or you imagine you're talking to yourself as a child who just really wants that thing, but it's going to be bad for them. it's going to be unhealthy, it's going to lead them away from where they want to be, you step in and go, okay. And always acknowledge the want. Of course you're going to want these things. Of course you're going to want what has calmed you in the past or soothed you or brought you comfort. And maybe joy, pleasure, right? Food does that. But in this moment, a healthy adult is going to say, if I give in to you, I don't care what kind of tantrum you're going to have. If I give in to you, I know it's going to end up in a bad place. And so because I'm in charge of your well-being, your health, your safety, I'm going to say no. So part of this is setting boundaries with yourself, just like you would for a child, if you want to take good care of that child, right? And sometimes, even the best parents give in, and it's not the end of the world. And it's not going to be the end of the world if you give in to, but if it's a consistent thing, guess what happens to children who are given their way all the time? They grow up to be absolute monsters, right? They bully people, they walk all over people, they have no respect for others or for themselves. That is not who you want to be. So you've got to learn that your healthy adult is in there, because look at the other areas of your life where you absolutely make healthy adult decisions and your child doesn't drive the bus, this child that wants what it wants when it wants it, right? You want to leave work at 2:30 in the afternoon. Of course you do. Who doesn't? It's a beautiful day. Everybody's going to the beach or whatever it is. Your healthy adult says, you know what? Of course you want to go with it. Go out. It's a beautiful day. But we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our family, to this company, and I really want that paycheck. And so you stay at work and you make those healthy decisions. So acknowledge the want, acknowledge the sadness of not having it, acknowledge whatever feelings you have, but be a healthy adult anyway, right? So let's look at using the 4 ACEs, which I've talked about in the past, to also help you make these healthy adult decisions for yourself when it comes to food and self-talk. All right, so awareness. Here's the 4 A's I'll give you the acronym if you've forgotten it. Sometimes I forget it too. So the 4 A's are awareness, acceptance, accountability, and attitude. The C in ACEs is for commitment, the E is for effort, the S is for self. So let's use these. All right, changing negative self-talk begins with awareness. So are you aware of how often and how bitterly you talk to yourself at sometimes? The nasty words you use, the derogatory statements you make to yourself. Chances are you're not nearly aware of how often you do that. So one of the things to do to become aware of it is to ask people in your life to let you know, wow, that was a really critical self-statement, or wow, you're really down on yourself today. And as you become more aware, you then have a choice, right? Acceptance. So awareness and acceptance. I accept that this is something that's been an issue for me for a long time, and I'm becoming more and more aware of how it's negatively affecting my life. So you accept that it happens, you become accountable, meaning I'm going to do something about it, right? I'm not just going to roll over and say this is okay, because it's clearly led me and is leading me and will lead me to places I don't want to go with my health. So as you increasingly become aware of it, accept that it's not going to go away overnight. It may never go away, but you can be accountable for saying, all right, is that how I want to proceed with this? Like, I just called myself a B word, or I just called myself an idiot, or I just called myself stupid. Is that going to take me where I want to go? No. If you continue down that rabbit hole, we talked at the beginning, it's going to hurt you, it's going to hurt your family, it's going to hurt your coworkers, it's going to hurt a lot of people. So you got to make a choice. I'm aware that I'm doing it. I accept that it's not going to go away overnight, but I also know that I'm accountable for making a change. What's my attitude toward this? Oh, it's too hard. It's too hard. I had somebody tell me one time, I'm sorry, Dr. Stapleton, I tried this and it just doesn't work. And I'm like, well, how long did you try it for? 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, well, let's give it another 2 years and see how we're doing. Because a lot of people, and myself included, have it starts to become less and less and less the norm. And you start thinking more positively about yourself. And you know what? I can do better than that. That isn't like me. Let me try this. So you replace that negative with something a little more positive or at least neutral. So I'm an idiot too. That isn't very nice. I'm not going to call myself that. I wouldn't call somebody else that. That wasn't my best move. I can do better, right? So that's how this works. And then you have to make a commitment. You have to make a commitment to yourself and the people in your support life to say, I'm going to work on this. And I would love it if we would all work on this together because it's going to improve all of our lives. In, I swear to you, every area of your life. The more you improve your self-talk, the life without a doubt. So you make a commitment and then you got to put forth the effort. And it does get tiring, right? It's like, oh, jeez. And I will tell you, yesterday I had an episode. I've gotten pretty good at not being one to do a lot of negative self-talk. And yesterday, man, I had what for me was an overwhelming, I was just overwhelmed. And when we get overwhelmed, our resolve and our ability to respond as well as we can and do most of the time kind of flips. And I was engaging in some negative self-talk and Um, a friend of me said to me, "You're really being your own worst enemy here." And it just kind of snapped me back. And it's like, that is not who I want to be. So I worked on what I was saying to myself and processed what was going on and worked through it and came out of it. And I don't go there very often anymore. But there are going to be times, right? Accepting that this will maybe never go away, that we will always have to work on it, but it comes easier and easier and easier over time, right? And the S in the four aces is for self because you matter. I matter. The people in my life matter. And the better myself is with myself in terms of self-talk and behavior, the better I'm going to be for all of those other people. So the bottom line, your self-talk may be causing you a whole lot of pain, a whole lot of grief, and it may be keeping you stuck in an unhealthy cycle with food. And it's definitely going to cause your self-esteem to tank and your self-worth to tank. So we've got to improve this self-talk so that we improve our self-worth, so that our behavior reflects a healthy self-worth. And that's just the way it is. And it takes effort, and you are worth it, and you can do it, as evidenced by the fact that so many people have and continue to. All right, so take home messages today. In our head, we have committees that can change the trajectory of years and years and years of negative talk from other people and negative self-talk. And we can make a difference by utilizing that committee. Telling the child, I understand you want what you want. Telling the critical parent or the critical person in yourself to zip it because it's not helping and it never has and it never will. And then to employ the healthy adult who acknowledges the child's wants and needs and says, my job is to keep you safe and healthy. So use that, use the four aces, make notes, put it in your phone, and use this information for healthy change in your life. So I invite you to keep track of two times in a day that you have caught yourself engaging in negative self-talk, but made a positive change. And you listened to the healthy adult that is within each and every one of you. All right. And then give yourselves credit. And I also invite you to encourage the people in your lives to engage in this with you, and maybe you can hold each other accountable or talk about the positive steps that you made. You can do it with your family, you can do it with your friends, you can do it with your support system. Take it to your support group and, you know, offer this up as a topic for a support group. And you could even lead it, because the more we teach something, the more we learn it and the more we implement it in our own lives. So I want to also encourage you all to go to my website, ConnieStapletonPhD.com. And if you're not already a member of Berry Aftercare, I want to tell you we have made some amazing changes, additions to Berry Aftercare. There are now 3 support groups, one for men only, one by a post-op who has just done incredible work. I have a woman named Laura Preston, who I want to thank so much, who is now managing the Facebook page for Berry Aftercare, because that is not one of my strengths. And I'm not going to give negative self-talk to myself other than to say, I acknowledge this is not a strength of mine. And so she is coming in and going to organize all of that. So we are doing those things. We're doing a daily check-in with people. We're going to do more live videos. And on Sunday night, Laura is going to do a live video on the Facebook page to help people prepare and plan for the week, to help set you up for a good week. So we're going to involve people a lot more. So that's www.berryaftercare.com. Thank you for joining me again. Sincerely, I appreciate your time. I know it's very valuable, and I appreciate that you are investing in yourself. All right, you guys, signing off as usual. This is your life, your health, your responsibility this day, and you know it every day. Thanks for being with me. Bye-bye.